This is Caregiver Storyteller, produced by CaringKind, the heart of Alzheimer's caregiving. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Storyteller, a storytelling podcast about Alzheimer's and dementia caregiving. I'm Dr. Ann Kenny, and I'll be interviewing caregivers to get their stories about Alzheimer's and dementia caregiving. Occasionally, I'll also interview authors, advocates, researchers, healthcare professionals, and people with Alzheimer's and dementia to hear their stories too. So are you ready? Here we go. I'm excited to have Pamela Edgar here on Caregiver Storyteller. So welcome, Pam.
Thank you.
Pam is the Director of Education and a Senior Therapeutic Specialist at CaringKind. But the reason she's on Caregiver Storyteller with me today is because we both have a love for advanced care planning. We both realize that's kind of odd, but that's okay. We're going to show you all why we think it's fun. Pam also worked at Compassion and Choices for years, as well as Vital Decisions that was then acquired by Evolent.
Evolent.
Evolent. And
Evolent.
in that capacity, Pam did a lot of training and education and counseling around advanced care planning for people living with dementia and not living with dementia, or supporting someone living with dementia. So I guess my first question to you, Pam, would be, what makes you love advanced care planning as much as I do?
It's a great question. I've seen the good that it can do, right? I think advanced care planning is studying for an exam that you never want to take, and frankly, that you don't know that you'll ever have to take. And I'm going to steal a line from you, Anne, that it allows people to curate the last chapter of their life. It allows people to really decide, who am I? Who am I as I evolve in illness? Who do I want to be? How do I want to be cared for? And it gives family members such guidance and permission. And when it's done fully and well and in conversation, it can really provide a blueprint for a very difficult emotional time in a family's life together. And it can just be a touchstone to go back to, so family members at the end can say, I know I did a good job here. I know I did all I could, and I know I followed their wishes.
Yeah.
And with that, there will always be grief and sadness,
But not
but
regret.
not regret,
Yeah.
not guilt, right? All the things that complicate grief,
Mhm.
right? The guilt, the regret, the broken families, right? The siblings not talking to each other anymore because they both had different ideas of what should happen or what we should do for mom, right? And I've seen that. I've seen families broken because of end of life, the way it progressed when things weren't discussed and everyone had different ideas. No one was on the same page, and everyone was emotional and frantic and doing their best, sure, but it just fractures things.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons I love advanced care planning.
And when you said that advanced care plan is the touchstone to come back to. So of course, end of life can be emotional and fractured because you're losing someone or it's bringing back some old family dynamics. But if you can have a space for that, but then come back to that touchstone, there's that potential place for healing, that old family dynamic can evolve into something beautiful that you can move forward, and maybe not so beautiful. I don't know, but it'll change if you have that touchstone, which I love. And so it sounds like you don't think of advanced care plan as a checklist or as a document. I mean, we know it is that as well, but tell me more about how you kind of see you talked about these discussions.
Sure. I definitely see it as a process. And you're right. You know, there's documentation, there's the healthcare proxy and the living will and all of those things. And we're going to have programs. I'm going to give a little shout out for our education programs at CaringKind. If you want to do a deeper dive, we'll have education programs on that. But really at the heart of it, you're choosing who you want to make decisions for you if you can't make them for yourself, and what those decisions are. And so often when we think about, you know, advanced care planning or a living will, it's that checklist. It's, do I want resuscitation, intubation, those kinds of very clinical, hard and fast, yes, no type questions. And really, it's so much more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
And and what becomes more important than do I want resuscitation or not is why.
Okay.
Why do I want resuscitation or not? And a lot of times people don't get into those deeper conversations that go into values. But when they do, right, everything that we talked about and why we love advanced care planning, those possibilities, families are really able to make decisions in a nuanced moment, knowing, okay, this is really the heart of this person's values. And so even though we didn't talk about this specific scenario, I know who they are and I know how to make a decision about this based on their values.
Hmm.
So I
Perfect.
can give it an example of someone that we worked with dementia who you know, was talking about advanced care planning and was talking about some, you know, she didn't want resuscitation and things like that anymore. But she seemed very concerned during the conversation. It seemed like we weren't really getting to the core of what was worrying her. And so I just asked, you know, when you think about your condition, what worries you the most?
Mhm.
Right? Because people with dementia don't often have heart events. You know, sometimes they do, but right, dementia is a different kind of progression in illness. So I
Right.
said, what worries you the most? And, you know, she when she talked about it, it really got to the core of, I, I'm worried that there's going to be a time where I'm not me anymore. You know, I'm not going to know my family. I know I'm not going to remember names and people. But when it came to her treatment and care, she was really concerned that, you know, people were going to start treating her differently and wouldn't treat her like her anymore. And
Hmm.
so so what does that look like? What would it look like for people to keep treating you like you, even if you didn't remember their name, or even if you couldn't tell them what you wanted in the moment? How could they still treat you like you?
Hmm.
Right? And then she talked about, well, well, one of the first things she says, well, if they allow booze in the place, bring me a martini. But she said, you
I could
know,
do that job for her.
but she said, you know, I want people laughing. I want music playing. I don't want it to be sad and quiet. I want, you know, tell me jokes. You know, the dirtier the better. And, you know, I want, don't dress me in drab, you know, things. Give me pink fuzzy blankets and make it bright in the room. And, you know, those things that she loved. She did some quilting. She, you know, bring my quilts to me. She loved those kinds of things. She wanted that to be a part, even if she didn't remember or know. She wanted those things. Her favorite perfume, her favorite fragrance. She wanted that in the room.
So
You
she
know,
told you how she wanted to live, not how she wanted to die.
exactly.
Yeah. Which I think helps families have these conversations when you start with, so tell me how you want to live. And
Mhm.
then you can gently add in, so this wouldn't be what you want. The,
Yeah,
yeah. Because I think sometimes that's the hard part is how do you start these conversations?
right. It can
And
be.
you're good at that. You
Um,
got any tips?
um, So it's very interesting. I've done this work for years, as you shared, and it's been really hard for me to have this conversation with some of my own family members.
Hmm.
right? They have been reluctant to it or say, yeah, 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 I have all that taken care of. Yep. So what I've done often is I'll say, I just heard this scenario on the news, or I just listened to this podcast and I heard about this kind of situation. And, I was thinking if this were you, this is the decision I might make for you. Is
Hmm.
that what you would want? Right.
Hmm.
So sometimes just doing it that way
Okay.
can be an in, and sometimes even talking about it can
Okay.
be a way to start, right? I think a lot of times we think about these conversations as one and done. I just want to get it over with. I want to have it one time, be done with it. Thinking about it more as an evolving process.
Hmm.
And it could be that if you're listening to this podcast today and you haven't had these conversations with loved ones for yourself, or you know that you might be the healthcare proxy for someone and haven't had those conversations, even just saying, I listened to a podcast about advanced care planning today and I realized we haven't really talked about this.
Hmm.
How do you feel about having that conversation?
Hmm.
Right? So the talking about it. And
And
and that can
honestly,
be
there's so many people that say, I don't want to talk about that. And when you get that pushback, say, I understand, but it's important to me. If you don't mind, if we don't have to do it right now, but maybe you could think about it a little bit and we could talk about it in about a week and give them a time frame because we could kick the can down the road forever.
right.
But if you say, "But it's important to me," most people will honor that. They will
Exactly.
say, "Oh, this isn't about me needing to have the conversations, it's about you needing to have it." And most of us want to help our family member
Mhm.
with whatever they're struggling with.
Exactly. It's about planting seeds, really. You're planting the seeds and then you revisit it and then you say why it's important to you. It's important to me to have this conversation as your daughter because I don't want to feel bad or guilty or wonder, did I
Right.
do the right thing for you?
Right.
Right? And I mean, when I said that to my dad, he was like, oh, he doesn't want that. He's still my dad. He wants to take care of me. And so when he realized that having a little bit more of a conversation would be caring for me, he was more open to it. And it was still, these little scenarios, these little moments, these little, small conversations along the way,
Mhm.
not a big sit down moment, but just a hey, check in. Is this what you would want? Is how I'm thinking about this? Or you just said this thing the other day that made me think that your wishes may have changed a little bit, and I just want to check in with you about that.
Mhm.
Right? Because it's
Yes.
also an evolving process. What your wishes might be, what my wishes are now and what my wishes will be 10 years from now could be very different.
Right.
Or, depending on my health conditions, depending on where I am in my life, there are so many different things that can change.
Right.
So having it be an ongoing conversation and a nuanced conversation that's also about how you want to be cared for and how you want to live. I think you said that beautifully, Anne. How
Yeah.
do you want to live this
Yeah.
chapter of your life?
Yeah. Nice. So with that value-based approach and that long conversations, uh, you've been talking about nuances.
Mhm.
What do you see as some of I mean, the difficult? What might happen? What are some of those nuances that people might be a little have some trepidation about walking into that water? Um,
I
I mean,
think
I'm just thinking of I just had a conversation with one of my youngest child, and I was telling them what I wanted, and they were like, "Well, h have you thought about how that would be for me?" And I
mm,
was like, "Oh, we need to have kind of the trade-off, like, I
mm,
get that it might be hard for you, but how can I make it easier for you? Because I'm not wavering on this desire of mine." And
mhm.
I mean, for me, having them say that, I was like, "Ooh, this needs to go deeper."
Yeah, yeah. So my brain's going in about four different directions. I'm trying to decide. So I think what you're saying is so important. About trade-offs, you're bringing up both trade-offs and who the person is to be your healthcare proxy. I think
Mm.
I would say first, a lot of people just automatically think, well, it's going to be my oldest child, right? And that's frankly what the healthcare system does. Is
Or your spouse
or your spouse,
who
right?
has skin in the game.
It has to be right, certain people in a certain order. And a lot of people think that way, like it's my spouse or it's my oldest child or it's, this order. Um, but really, it should be someone that you feel can understand your wishes and be your advocate, be
Mhm,
your voice,
mhm,
and carry them out without a lot of burden on them, ideally, or having that conversation about, well, what would it be like for you? Let's really talk about what it would be like for you to carry this out. And what supports would you need? And how do we put that into place for you? And if you really feel like you can't, that's okay. This is a
right,
specific role. It doesn't mean you don't love me or I
right,
don't love you.
right.
A lot of times people say, I have to choose all my kids because I love them all. Well, of course you love them all, but they may not all be able to do that. It's like not everyone can drive a semi truck, right?
Right.
There's certain proclivities
Somebody in your
and
house
skills.
might be a better cook than someone else. Someone might
Exactly.
be a
That's
better decision maker than someone else.
exactly. Or a better advocate.
Right.
Someone might get really shy around doctors and not be able to ask questions or not feel like they can really say, hey, no, we said we didn't want this. Let's have that conversation. Or,
Mhm,
because sometimes a decision maker has to be a bit assertive or
mhm,
ask a lot of questions to understand
right,
what the doctors are proposing in terms of care and to really make that decision. Does
right,
that align with the values or not? Or,
right.
if we're going to put someone if I'm agreeing to put someone on a ventilator, they said that we want to revisit that in a month. They don't want to be on it forever. If it's going to improve their situation and they're going to get back to a certain baseline, they're
Mhm,
happy to be on the ventilator. But I want to be sure as the advocate that the doctor understands that I'm not saying yes indefinitely. I'm saying yes for a month trial and then we
right,
reevaluate. And do I have your understanding and agreement that after a month, if things aren't improving in a certain way, that we're going to stop that treatment and that, we're aligned in that.
right.
Right. So I think the decision maker is really important, choosing someone and having those conversations of how comfortable they feel. People name decision makers and healthcare proxies all the time and don't even tell them, don't even let
Uh,
them know. And frankly, it's funny to me because even the documentation, the decision maker doesn't sign off. You need two
right.
other witnesses to sign off. The decision maker is just named. They never have to know based on the documentation.
Right.
So please, if you've chosen someone to be your decision maker, tell them and
And
tell them
and have those conversations
and
so that
have those
they yeah,
conversations.
yeah.
But another thing that you talked about was the trade-offs, and I think that's another really important piece. I'm going to think about two values that we often hear, right?
Mhm,
So people will say, I don't want to burden my families. I don't want to be a burden on my families. My kids have their own lives. I know they have their own families. They're doing a lot of things. I don't want to be a burden,
mhm,
right? So that's one value. And
right.
then people will say, but I want to be at home. I want to receive care at home,
Mhm,
which is another important value, right?
mhm,
But if you're going to receive care at home, someone is going to have to deliver that care, and someone is going to have to manage the delivery of that care, which is often a family member. So how do you balance those two things, right? And then financial planning comes into that. There are a lot of other components that come into that, which is another reason to start early, start these conversations early. But a lot of times it's these trade-offs. So what if it becomes very difficult for your family to care for you at home? Then which of these two values sort of rises to the top? Or
Hmm.
how are you going to handle that together as a family? And some people will say, well, if it really becomes too much of a burden for my family, if they can't care for me at home, or, if it becomes too difficult, then I understand that going to a facility might be a better option. And,
Right. And hearing that from somebody who holds that value of I want to be at home, because some families will literally bend over backwards to honor that to the point of breaking, as we talked about earlier. There can be fractures in that, um, without enough support, because
Mhm,
n- very, very few of us have sat at the bedside of someone dying. So you're being put into a job that you're not at all prepared for.
right.
And so, what are those supports to stay at home versus
Mhm,
when is it okay to
right.
give permission? Like, if it becomes too much, it's
Exactly.
okay. Or if it becomes too much, please bring in extra support, whichever is your trade off.
Mhm.
But give that permission so that,
Yeah, exactly. Please bring in extra supports. Hospice can be a great support, but even hospice needs
more,
family or someone there,
right?
to be providing care. So I think it's also understanding what to expect, that
Yeah.
learning piece of
Yeah.
knowing what the trajectory is going to look like and be realistic about that. And
And
then,
the advocate has to ask those questions. I don't think that's really that forthcoming from the medical community unless the question is asked.
right.
Not everybody is thinking, this is what it takes to die at home. This is what it is. And,
Yes.
it's somebody in extreme distress that asks the questions. But what if you asked them before you were in extreme distress?
Exactly. Understanding, what is that going to look like? Okay, so if my loved one is at home, there might be moments where I'm seeing it very difficult for them to breathe.
Hmm.
And I know now that, and that happened to me. I was a caregiver and care partner for my grandmother's best friend from college, who was 103 when she passed, and I was with her. But I saw moments of her really having difficulty breathing, and was able to call hospice, and they walked me through, their medications you get, and they walk you through that. But I was administering them. I was there with her, and I had some preparation for that. I
Hmm.
knew that these were some of the things that you might expect to see. But when people don't, it's, you're seeing your loved one suffer, and then oftentimes people, even if they're on hospice, will call 911 because they panic, because they get nervous,
Right.
right? And so understanding what things might look like,
Hmm.
understanding what are the supports in place for those things, understanding, how are we going to manage some of these potential trade-off situations. Um, and you asked what are some of the challenges, or what are some of the things that might get in the way of people having these conversations. And I think another fear that happens, and certainly happened for Isabel, my surrogate grandmother, was this idea of wanting to be in control,
Hmm.
right? If I make someone my healthcare proxy or my financial power of attorney, I'm giving over a certain amount, this feeling, I'm giving over control to someone else. Someone
Right.
else gets to make these decisions for me, and
Hmm.
I'm giving over my power. And that was very true for her. And so she waited a long time to put some of those things in place.
Okay.
And for the healthcare proxy, it's important for people to know that that gets triggered when someone has difficulty making decisions for themselves, right? So it's not
And not
immediate
before.
and not before.
Right. So even though you have a proxy, it doesn't mean you've given over anything until you cannot make your own decision.
Yes. Yes. Or you decide, or you can even decide, these decisions are too hard for me. I want them to make them.
Right.
Or it is decided by doctors. But um, what happened in her situation, because her cognition was changing
Excuse me.
as she progressed in her illness, and as she aged, she
Mhm.
had some dementia. And it was hard for her to think through the consequences of certain decisions, right?
Mhm.
So she wasn't feeling well. She wanted to go to the hospital. She was in the hospital. She ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks. And the minute she got there, she wanted to be out, right? Because she didn't understand what it meant to be in the hospital. She didn't understand that there was care that could be available for her at home.
Mhm.
She heard the word hospice. She said, I don't want that, because of her preconceptions on hospice, not understanding that that is really care for someone who's living, right?
Mhm.
It's care to help someone live comfortably,
Right.
with quality of life, right? Again, that idea of how are you living, right?
Right.
A lot of people think about hospice, and that's about death, right?
Right.
But it really is about how are you going to live every day of your life the best you can, the most comfortably that you can. And
Right.
she couldn't understand that. So some decisions were made. She ended up in the hospital a few times, was very miserable, um, did not get certain care that she could have probably sooner that would have eased her suffering,
Mm.
which was very hard for me to witness and see. But I also had to just recognize, like, she's living her values in a way of
Right.
being in
Right.
control. She's living her full personality.
Right.
And even though I feel sad and recognize that things could have been a little bit easier for her, it's a trade-off, right? She's
Right.
being fully herself in these
Mhm.
ways.
Right.
And then when I did get the ability to make decisions for her, then I was able to make some choices to ease her suffering from that point forward.
And honor her control in a different way.
And honor her control in a different way, right? Because it goes back to the choice. If you choose someone that you really trust, who really knows and understands, and you both feel confident that you can carry out your wishes, you're actually taking back control.
Right.
You're not giving away control.
Right.
You're maintaining control,
Right.
because you have someone who's going to make those choices for you, who's
They're
going
gonna
to,
step out of their own shoes into yours, make the
yes.
choices as you would, as a substitute versus taking their own values and placing them on you, if you pick the right person.
Beautifully said. And you have those conversations, so they
Right.
really know.
They know.
And she wasn't someone who had those conversations with me. So Anne, I think that's really important for families to also recognize, sometimes if you can't have those conversations, surrogates can feel like, well, then I don't know what to do. What I did was make those choices based on who I knew her to be, based on
Right.
her values.
Right.
Okay, she would not want to be in a diminished state for a long period of time.
Yeah.
She would not want to be in pain. She would not want um, this idea of dignity.
Mhm.
What does dignity look like? And so dressing
And
her
by
in
watching
certain
her life,
clothes.
you had a good idea what her definition of dignity was.
Yes.
And that's as a palliative care doctor, I often ask people to tell me the story about the individual who may not be able to speak to me
Mm,
because of when I step into the scene. They tell me enough of the story. I ask the story of their life, and then I give them that language. I'll go, "Oh, that sounds like maybe she wouldn't have wanted this, but would want this. Am I right?" And it helps them go, "Oh, we're making decisions the way she would want." not out of guilt or w- my values, but it's a wonderful way to go to put that little bit of space to help the decision maker make a decision.
Exactly. Exactly. And dignity can be small things like I would love you to share the story you shared about your mom, and
Okay.
if you don't mind,
Sure.
just
So
the
for my mom, dignity was that she needed her hair done perfectly every day. And she was pretty late in her dementia. And if I put a mirror up and she saw herself in a mirror, um, and she did want to have a mirror put up to her every day, um, she would like make these faces if her hair wasn't done. And I would do her hair and I'd put the mirror back up and she would beam because and she loved having her hair done. I think it was the touch and the attention, and for her, that was dignity. You are making me look pretty no
Mhm.
matter what. And that was one of her deep values, that she wanted to be pretty. And so, doing her hair every day was very important to her, and it showed in that smile, or non-grimace. Either one.
Sure.
Either one.
Sure. And I love what you're saying there too about how we translate love differently when people progress in their condition,
Right.
right? That oftentimes we think love is conversation, or we relate to each other intellectually, or we think about love as food very often, right? Feeding
Right.
people, giving them food is love. And I think this translation of actually love for this person where they are now is doing their hair,
Right.
is putting lotion on their hands, is
Right.
spraying their favorite perfume around them.
Mhm.
Is I worked with one family who was able to, he had cancer, and
Mhm.
was able to sort of curate his last days,
Mhm.
and really had a lot of conversations with his family about the music he wanted in the room and the poems. And he was Buddhist and wanted certain meditations and things. His cancer trajectory included a great deal of pain,
Mhm.
but one of his trade-offs was, I can tolerate a certain amount of pain so I can be with my family every day.
Mhm.
And the doctors, they really worked out a pain regimen for him so that he was sleeping much of the time, but around 2:30 every day, they would ease the medications. He would be able to interact with people, and they were able to get it to a fairly consistent schedule, so his
Mhm.
family knew when to be there. They He wanted different people to come, so they were able to invite those people and have them. They found a place where they allowed their dog. They had a large Great Dane dog that he wanted to be with him and a part of this process. So they found somewhere where they could bring in the dog, and they lowered the bed so the dog's head could be right there. And, and the family afterwards just shared with me, even though they were in deep grief, because he was younger as
Mhm.
well, when he passed, um, they said, it just was beautiful. It was just beautiful to know that we were with him the way he wanted us to be with him.
Mhm.
And we didn't have any questions or doubts. We always felt like we sort of knew what to do next,
Mhm.
and how to,
That was his gift to them, is giving them that roadmap. Yeah.
and their gift to him was following it,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
and translating love then into bringing the dog, sharing those poems, sharing those memories, that, like, tell me this story, tell me that story, these are the stories I want to hear. Because as a palliative care doctor, of course, hearing is one of the last senses to go. And
Right.
so, having music, hearing those stories, they say very often they believe people can still take that in, whether it's intellectually understanding all of the words or just the vibrations or the sounds, but that being able to translate love in those ways that allows a person to be them and allows a person to have that dignity is the gift of advanced care planning, which goes
It
right
is.
back to the why we love it. And
Yeah.
why do you love it, Anne? Are these some of the reasons why you love it?
Absolutely, because it opens up those possibilities. I mean, we shared this when we were kind of getting ready to do this. We plan births so much. We talk about what you want in the room and how you want to greet this new baby. And I love that advanced care planning helps you curate that death, that you get to plan two moments of this mystery are birth and death. And we 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 often hide from death, or our society in this 100 years hides from
Mhm.
death, but it's such a part of life. And um, I love that advanced care planning kind of brings it out of the shadows and allows this emotional um, and loving approach to it. So my kids are like, "Do we have to talk about death again?" I'm like, "Yes, we do. We're going to talk about it again."
I know it. I would say when I go to parties, sometimes when people would ask me what I do, and sometimes I would say I do advanced care planning or I do end of life work, and there would be silence. And then there would be, well, we just went through that with my dad. We just
Hmm.
went through that with my grandpa. We're going through that now. And the people are hungry actually
Yeah,
to talk
yeah,
about it, I
they are.
think. I sometimes now I just say, oh, I'm a therapist. No one really wants to talk about that. So sometimes I'll say, I'm an education director. If I don't want to have those conversations, because, and I often welcome them, but people are hungry
Yeah,
to
agreed.
have a safe space to be able to talk about this. Um, and it is scary. It is emotional. All of those things are true.
But the more you do it, it becomes joyful and
Mhm.
expansive
Mhm.
and evolving. Things many of us want in our lives. We don't want to be stagnant. We want to figure out the new mysteries, and this is one of those great frontiers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrap up, what
Mm.
what would be your last bit of advice in people thinking about advanced care planning? What would you say?
I think exactly what we're saying is start.
Okay.
Start the conversation. Just start it any way you can. Start it messy. Start it, start it
So don't pull out
small.
the form. Don't
Don't
start the
pull out
conversation.
yeah, don't pull out the form. Don't pull out those things. Say, and you can even start by thinking about, why does this matter to you?
I love
Why,
that. What's the why?
what's your why?
Yeah.
Why do you want to have this conversation, either for yourself or for someone else?
Mhm.
Um, and you can also think about, like, what's keeping you from it. What are the things that are making you sort of back away from it? But
Mhm.
then what might be the benefit of this? And I think
What's
this,
one small step you can take?
what's one small step you can take to just start?
Mhm.
And I think framing it ultimately as an act of love, that would be my why, is
Mhm.
that is that ultimately this is an act of love in any role, right? If
Mhm.
you're going to be the surrogate, if you're the person who's planning your own advanced care, it's an act of love to have these conversations. And if you can approach it that way, I think it can open up possibilities.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, Pam, I know you said you would give me some resources to put in the show notes, and there's education
Absolutely.
coming in with CaringKind. We
There
will.
is, and there are. the Conversation Project is a
Okay.
great website that is all about starting the conversation. So they have prompts and things in there. There's also an advanced care planning document called the 5 Wishes, which is a little bit more nuanced than just, I want resuscitation or not. It gets into, how do I want to be cared for? What do I want that to look like? Music, and it also has some sections for after death, what you want that to look like. So that can be a really helpful document, either as a resource or as something to complete.
Okay. Thank you. So thank you for joining me today, talking about one of my favorite subjects with me. I
Oh,
appreciate it.
thank you.
I know it's going to help a lot of people. So thank you so
We
much.
hope so. We sure hope
Okay.
so. Thank you so much, Anne, for inviting me in.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to share your story, go to caringkindnyc.org/podcast. Maybe we'll use your story on the show. We'd love to hear from you. Please subscribe to this podcast and leave some glowing feedback. We love positive reinforcement. I'm Dr. Ann Kenny, and you're listening to Caregiver Storyteller, produced by CaringKind